Thank you all for being here this evening to join us for our third session of the Heifer Management webinar series. I am delighted to welcome Dr. Kelly Sporer as our speaker for today's webinar. With a wealth of experience and expertise in records analysis and on-farm implementation of breeding programs, Kelly is known for her skill and knowledge both in the lab and on the farm. Kelly brings years of experience to the dairy industry, graduating from Michigan State University with a BS in animal science and from the University College Dublin with a PhD in animal husbandry and veterinary science, where she investigated the effect of transportation stress on the immune system of cattle. She also managed 2 research labs at Michigan State University and then completed numerous research trials at CentralStar Cooperative before shifting to her current position of records analysis consultant. So Kelly's passion for research and data is evident throughout her involvement in the dairy sector, working closely with farmers to evaluate their reproduction, production, milk quality, herd turnover, controlling inventory levels, and overall helping producers to be more profitable. She has published over 30 scientific and popular press articles, as well as dozens of presentations locally and internationally. We are honored to have Kelly share her insights with us today, and I'm certain that her expertise will enrich our discussion and provide invaluable takeaways for all the participants on managing heifer inventory. So welcome, Dr. Kelly Sporer, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Cora. I'm so honored to be here and looking forward to talking and then hopefully having some good questions and discussions. Let me get my show started here. So I titled this Managing Heifer Inventory, the Future of Your Operations. What I hopefully want to stress throughout this is that everything that we're doing is ensuring the success and the future of the farm and just trying to be as successful as possible. So first, I'm just going to give a little bit of background, some trends and some facts in the industry right now, and then go into why we want to manage heifer inventory. So I'm sure it's no secret to most of us in the industry that heifer numbers have been on the decline and are now at an all-time low, which has been driving the value of heifers up. I'd like to thank my colleague Chuck Sattler at Select Sires for sharing some information on a talk that he had given and sharing this figure, which shows the number of heifers expected to calve in the next year by birth year. And so currently in 2024, we are only going to be able to support a 27.7% cull rate and basically are going to need to keep cows around for 3.6 lactations with the number of heifers that we have in inventory. Next piece of background, reproduction has improved. So there was a time that the average pregnancy rate in the US was in the teens and low 20s. It was harder and it took more tries to make a heifer. As we see here, around the time we had the revolution of timed AI. Since then, we have been able to genetically select for repro traits. We've had the revolution of activity monitoring systems. We're getting more heifers, or we're getting cows and heifers pregnant more than we ever have in the past. And we're doing that with the milk production as well. So the average pregnancy rate in the area that I cover is currently about 28%. I have more and more herds that have crossed the 30% threshold, and even some heading into the mid and upper 30%. So we've made improvements in dairy calf mortality. So I hear this anecdotally from a lot of my professors, but I found some USDA data. The most recent I could find was from 2014, but basically they had showed from previous studies in 1992 and 2007 that as of 2014, we had reached a morbidity, cases of scours, pneumonia, et cetera, of about 33.8%, with mortality down to 5%. So like I said, more heifers are surviving calfhood. The semen type and usage is changing. And so this was a great paper by Megan Lauber and her team with Dr. Paul Fricke at Wisconsin that basically shows that the use of beef and sex semen have continued to increase while conventional semen usage has decreased. So we're seeing sex semen being used mostly in early services of heifers and first lactation cows, while more beef semen is being used in mature cows and later services. This is from 2019 to 2021, but these trends have continued over the past 2 to 3 years. So now I'll really get into it. Why should we manage heifer inventory? In my opinion, I basically came up with 5 main reasons. I'm open to other thoughts, but just from my observations and what I'm seeing in my herds, these are important ones, and I'm going to go into more detail in the following slides. So, number 1, decreasing heifer raising costs. Number 2, reduce stress on staff and facilities. Number 3, improve heifer and cow performance. Number 4, take advantage of the beef on dairy market. And number 5, to ensure the best future for the operation. So throughout this presentation, I just want to stress that every farm is different. There's going to be no one size fits all strategy or approach to managing heifer inventory. And so that's where each farm can lean on their trusted advisors to help create custom strategies and meet each farm's specific needs and goals. So most recent estimates that I have seen are estimating it costs about $2,500 to raise a heifer from birth to freshening. And about 50% of this cost comes from feed. So I think it's important to remember that it takes 1.5 to 2 lactations for a heifer to pay for her own replacement cost. Yes, the dairy market, or the market for dairy heifers is high right now. However, as my mentor, the great Julie Ainsworth, would say, we can never count on what the market is going to do, but we always know we'll save money by not creating more heifers than we need. Next is reducing stress on staff and facilities. So this is just an example that I've seen in some of my herds. So this I've seen in numerous herds that when we have these big slugs of calves, so you can see in this herd, we had 96 calves born in December, which is up from 50s and 60s. It was reflected in the calf deaths that month. So we only had 18 for the whole year, 10 of which happened in December. Even in smaller herds, I see that mainly one person is responsible for calf care, and that's usually not their only responsibility on the farm. So in the case of this herd, January through March, they've just been getting slammed. This herd actually does an extremely good job with calf care and keeping calves alive. However, it's obvious that it takes a toll on the calf caretakers and on their other responsibilities in the farm. Another challenge and opportunity that I see when we have excess heifers is overcrowding and then delayed flow through the pens up to the breeding pen. So these heifers get backed up because only so many can be moved at a time. This is a pretty extreme example of a herd that I've been working with that has a pretty late and a pretty spread out for age at first service in heifers. So as you can see, we're on a downward trend. It's been getting better and tighter in the last couple months because we got creative and started to come up with some ideas about how to redistribute pens and stuff like that. But I'd like to see about 90% of my heifers getting bred in a 30-day window. This herd is starting about 410, 415 days, but there's still heifers getting their first service out past 500 days. So this is going to increase the days that a heifer is on feed, which in turn increases her replacement cost, as well as reducing the heifer reproductive efficiency, which is going to increase and then also spread out that age at first calving. So this is a cycle, as when we get to improving heifer and cow performance, this is the cycle that I've observed in a number of my herds. So we have excess heifers, the pens are crowded, we have more health events, more stress on the heifers, more repro culls because they actually have a harder time getting bred. And in some of the herds that are chalking and doing heat detection, the heifers aren't even showing heats as well because they're so crowded. With that, then we have a higher non-completion rate, and then we need to make more replacements, and then the cycle just kind of keeps going around. If we can optimize the number of heifers that we're making, we can have appropriately stocked pens, which leads to less stress, fewer health events, better reproductive efficiency. Then we're going to lower our non-completion rate and optimize the number of days that those heifers are on feed. We create the optimal generation of replacements. And then we get these platinum heifers, which I love this term by Dr. Gavin Staley. These heifers we have set up for success as she enters the milking herd, and throughout her productive life. They enter the herd at an optimal weight and maturity, and then they just take off in milk production. So when there's not an influx of fresh heifers coming in, we can keep our close-up and fresh pens at the correct capacity, let mature cows make up the majority of the herd, which I like to see 40% or above third plus lactation cows. And then they just do their thing, which is to crank out milk and components. So in this graph, I've got first lactation, second lactation, and then third plus. The percent of cows that are in each of those. So 32% first, 27% second, and 41% third plus. Y-axis is 305-day actual energy corrected milk. So you just see the stair step where you can see that your older mature cows are the ones that are making the most milk, and it benefits you to not have the flip side, which is 40+% of your herd in first lactation making the least amount of milk in the whole herd. So again, another term that I love from Dr. Gavin Staley is these golden girls. And then I took my own humorous spin on it because that's how I see them. But these cows have paid for themselves. They are now turning a profit for the farm. With all that being said, the caveat is that we have to take care of these girls. The herds that I see that have 40% plus in third plus lactation have excellent cow comfort, excellent transition care, and appropriate pen stocking. These are textbook lactation curves. This is a herd that I just met with, and I told them that exact same thing. So red line is first lactation, green is second, blue is third plus, x-axis is days in milk, y-axis is current milk, the average of the whole herd. So all lactations are peaking well and persisting. This herd has 43% of cows in third plus lactations. Here's their peak from the last test. First lactation is peaking about 80% of second, and this herd is approaching 8 pounds of combined fat and protein. I'm sure that everyone in our industry is aware of the current beef on dairy market. And so this is a figure that shows the beef dairy cross calf crop, which has grown almost exponentially. Right now, the US native beef herd is down and is expected to take a few years to recover yet. The quality of our beef dairy cross calves has continued to improve with daily gains, carcass quality. We've been getting better at using the right bulls on the dairy cows and achieving pretty good meat quality there. I come from a beef background originally, and I am so impressed at the traceability and recording in the dairy industry. So we know that traceability is important to the customers, and this is something that they can achieve with these beef dairy cross calves. And then lastly, we all know that the price of these calves has just continued to increase. So I say this to my producers, let's just think, would you rather, if you're gonna make a calf, would you rather spend $2,500 to raise a heifer that you don't need, or make $600 to $700? And I've heard of much higher than this, but I wanted to give a pretty fair value on a 1 to 3 day old calf that is a beef dairy cross calf. And so lastly, as far as the why, these heifers are the future of the herd. We have the ability to create the optimal number of the best replacements possible to meet the herd's goals. we can balance those mature productive cows with the genetically superior heifers coming in, that young fresh blood to help just keep the genetic progress of the herd going. We can minimize our heifer non-completion rate, and then hopefully all these things add up as far as putting the operation in a favorable financial position to continue successfully on into the future. So hopefully now I've convinced you why we should manage heifer inventory. Now I'm going to show you how. So Select Sires uses a program called the Optimal Genetic Pathways, or OGP program. Many consultants and partners have their own programs. This isn't the only one, and they can achieve similar goals as far as generating the optimal number of replacements, as well as evening out those slugs and slumps of calves, making the maximum genetic progress based on the producer's goals, what they want to select for. At the end of the day, all of this is moot if we can't put it into a strategy that is easy and effective for the AI technicians to follow. These are the guys and the gals that are getting the cows pregnant, and we need to make sure that we are making it able for them to follow easily on busy days. And that's why we also can track compliance and progress with this program. So to do so, I do this almost every day, is input specific herd variables into the program: heifer non-completion, all the factors that we've been talking about: heifer non-completion rate, cull rate, abort rate, age at first breeding and calving, conception rates, etc. Then we determine our heifer needs. We determine which females are eligible to breed within a certain time frame, which I usually run this quarterly for the majority of my producers. And then we can actually determine which females receive what semen type. An example of the inputs that I really like to show my producers when we sit down together. So heifer non-completion rate is a huge factor. I really like to see my herds under 15%. If we get higher than that, then we really need to dig down and investigate where we are losing these girls and what we can do about it. I like to see a cull rate of less than 35%. Like I said, that kind of balances your mature cows with your young heifers or your young gals coming in. Most of my herds are successfully calving in heifers at about 23 months of age. Now, a range can work. I've seen it work in many other herds. However, for the majority of my herds, I see if we get down below 22 months, those heifers are not mature, they're underperforming, and we can see that usually reproductively and in production in first and sometimes even into second lactation. On the flip side, once we get above 24, 25 months, it's usually not worth the extra days on feed when we look at their first lactation production. So this is what the strategy looks like, and I'm going to break down pieces of this over the next couple slides. So first, we usually start with our heifers. The majority of my herds are breeding all heifers to 1 to 3 services of sex semen and then switching to conventional or beef. With that being said, I'd like to see close to 90% of heifers getting pregnant in 3 services. So this is a herd that we have identified a proportion of the heifers that actually aren't as genetically good as the first lacs. And so each quarter we kind of identify what proportion that is. And then those low heifers, this 13%, is going to get bred to beef right from the start. Next, we're going to move on to cows. And so this is just an example of one herd. We can make the strategy as easy or as complicated as we want. I have herds that just breed everything to conventional. I have ones that have like 6 or 7 different categories, especially when they start doing embryos and stuff like that. So in this herd, those high first lactation cows are getting 2 services of sexed and then going on to conventional. We do have a proportion of second plus lactation cows that we don't want to get bred to beef. Right now, those are getting bred to conventional and then beef in later services. And then we figure out what percent of the rest of the herd gets just gets bred to all beef. We determine that and we tweak those percentages by looking at what the herd's desired herd size is, how many heifers they need per month, and then determining what percent buffer they are comfortable with. So the default that we've been using is about a 10% buffer. With that being said, I have producers that just aren't comfortable with that. They want to run it higher, 20, 25%. That's perfectly fine if that's what makes them feel more comfortable. I have others that want to run it as tight as possible, around some even 100, 105%. So for some herds, especially when we're just starting, I will actually run this strategy according to what it looks like they've been doing. And then I'll show them, hey, we're making 180% of heifers, of the number of heifers that we need. And we can actually put the dollars to that. Some of my colleagues have come up with great calculators where you say, hey, you need 15 heifers a month and you're making 28. $2,500 times the difference is what we could be saving each month. For herds in expansion mode, we can actually adjust that future desired herd size to help get them there, as long as we remember that the heifers we're making right now won't enter the milking herd for almost 3 years. And then lastly, this is a feature that our producers and our sales reps really like, as we can estimate the monthly product type use. So this makes semen inventory and ordering much easier. So now I'm just going to go through a couple of the graphs that the program generates that I think, again, are really helpful and a good visual for the producers when we meet with each other. So this one shows on the x-axis we have month, and so this was one that I started in April, and then the quarter will go through July. The red line is how many heifers we need per month, so 67. The gray line is how many heifers we will make if we stick with that current strategy that I just showed you. And I like this because it goes out over about 9 months, and we can see that heading into the next quarter and then after that, we're going up a little bit, so we're probably going to have to crank the beef semen up a little bit. But like I said, this is a herd that's been on the program for a few years, and it's getting more and more consistent, and we'll see that in a couple of graphs as well. This figure shows where our replacements are being produced. So by month, April, May, June, July. Red bars are heifers that are coming out of heifers. Green bars are heifers coming out of first lactation. Black are the second plus lactation, and the gray bars are total. So obviously we'd like to see the majority of our heifer replacements coming out of those genetically superior females, which are usually our youngest, our heifers and our first lactation. And then this just helps us maximize genetic progress. This graph is going to show the number of calves that are due by existing pregnancies right now. So this is where we can see if or when those slugs and slumps are coming. So in this left chunk of bars, each bar is a month that calves are due. This is going to show the beef cross calves that are due. And this is helpful for some of my producers who have a contract with their buyer and need to generate X number of beef calves a month to meet that. The set of bars on the farthest right are dairy heifers that are due by month. You'll notice once we get out to November, a lot of those are pregnancies that haven't been called yet. So that's not really accurate. We can just kind of look at this middle chunk. You can see this herd, like I said, is getting more consistent, where we're going to get a little heavy here in July, but not as bad as some of these herds that I see going up and down and up and down. And then the set of bars that immediately to the left of that is taking into account that non-completion rate, which in this herd, it was about 10%. So it's estimating how many dairy heifers are actually going to enter the milking herd of those ones that are due in the upcoming months. This graph is showing existing heifers by age in months compared to what we need. And so this is a herd that is maintaining herd size right now. So current herd size and desired herd size are basically the same. Um, these are heifers that are within 1 month of age, 2, 3, all the way out to, still got a 26-month-old heifer hanging out here. Pink shows heifers that are pregnant, and green are heifers that are open or have not been bred yet. And so in some cases, this graph can be very helpful in identifying months that we have excess heifers. And so a producer can say, oh, hey, I have 16 excess 5-month-old heifers. I know that once we get past a certain point, I'm not really going to lose anymore. Maybe I can sell some of those as dairy culls. And like I was saying earlier, we can build into the strategy if producers have a market for dairy heifers. We can build dairy culls in there so that we can actually make more heifers to sell as dairy sales. With that being said, I like to tell producers, depending on what age you're going to sell her, we need to make sure that we're at least breaking even. If you think you're going to sell springers or late bred heifers, I mean, we've put $2,500 into them by then. And I've heard some astronomical dairy sale prices lately, but again, we still have all that work and money into getting them to that point. So, like I said from the beginning, my goal is to help producers be as profitable as possible. I love making custom strategies. I love sitting down and listening to producers and hearing what their experience, what their goals are, working together to figure out what their opportunities and their challenges are. And this program, really, the sky is the limit. We can tweak it any which way that we want to. And you see this cow is just flying off into the sky because she knows that we are doing whatever we can to make her herd be more profitable. So I'd really like to thank everyone for your time and attention this evening, and I would be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kelly. That I love the way that you explain data, which is why I was so happy you were able to come on and do this, because you easily pick out all the pieces and make every graph, every piece of data just so easy to understand. So thank you so much again for coming on. And once again, if anybody has any questions, feel free to throw them into the Q&A and we can address those. And even if you have some questions that may not be necessarily related to some of the data that we showed, but just general repro, we can easily dive into that. We want to open it up for discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Cora. I really love what I do, and I tell my producers I'm a huge data nerd. So they're like, "Why? How did you go into so much detail, or how did you find that?" And I'm like, "Because I spend all day, every day, going down rabbit holes and digging into something until I find the answer that
Yep.
I'm looking for."
It's like, I did not just look at this one graph that I'm showing you. I promise you that.
I like that a lot of it is, it's stuff that the producers don't have time to look
Right.
into, and being viewed as a trusted advisor to them and having them trust me to find those things out for them and show them where some of those challenges and opportunities are really is what makes me get up every morning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess some questions that I came up with um while listening. What would you say are, I don't want to say like the pitfalls, but when it comes to recording, what are the key pieces that, if it's not being recorded, it makes an inaccurate picture where you as a consultant can't give an either an accurate or a whole picture answer as to, hey, this is what's going on.
That is a great question, and it's something that I deal with frequently. So I appreciate that producers are busy. I appreciate that not every operation has a person who loves sitting down and punching in numbers for hours at a time. The herds that I see this program work the best and the most accurately are those who really do have a designated person on farm who either have a passion for it or just want to be organized and really keep those records accurate. A couple places that I have seen things that have made me ask questions. If a herd has a 0% stillborn rate, I don't call them liars. I just say, are you sure? Because I don't,
Yeah.
no offense, but I don't believe you.
Yeah.
And if we don't know, then I'll usually just put in an average, like the average of the herds that we work with is about 5%. My goal
Okay.
is 6%. And so I'll
Yeah.
usually just put in 5 or 6%. I had another herd. So one of the fields that I put in is percent female when bred to conventional semen, and then percent female when bred to sex semen. And so what I find is that we usually run 47, 48% female with conventional, and we guarantee 90% with our sex semen, so it better be above that. And I usually see it like 92, 95, sometimes even higher. So I had a herd that had 40% female from conventional semen. And I'm like, this is weird. That can't be right. And when I looked, they were coding all the beef calves as male. And so then I had to figure out how to break out the beef cross calves. And then after I did it for long enough, I'm just like, I rarely ever see a herd off of like 47 or 48%. So I just started putting that in.
Yeah.
Probably the last and the biggest challenge that I see in keeping heifer inventory is keeping heifer inventory in the system. And so I have a report in PC Dart, or we can do it in Dairy Comp, which will run, that basically I sort the heifers and I'm just like, we have a bunch of 37-month-old heifers that were due a couple years ago.
Yeah.
I think they're just not here anymore.
Right.
And so when I meet with producers, I'll make a list of those heifers, and usually I'll take them out of the inputs with the strongly educated assumption that they're not actually in inventory. But I tell producers, and I've sat down to the computer and helped some of them just clean up heifers before. Because it does affect the accuracy, and that's partly why I tell people we have all this fine print at the bottom of the OGP that's basically, this is a guideline. It's better than nothing. It's better than what we had before, but it's not perfect. I mean, things happen. That's also why we run it every quarter, because conception rates change. Sometimes calf death changes just depending on what they have going on, etc. So
who's breeding them, who's putting
right,
everything in, who's absolutely.
But then usually when I'm putting in those inputs, I'll notice things, and then those are the things that I'll bring up at the meeting. I was just like, hey, when I was here last time, you guys had 44% conception rate across the cows, and it's dropped 7% in the last couple months. Why? What's happening? And then it's like, oh yeah, we had a bad batch of feed, or oh yeah, this thing happened. And I'm just like, okay, is it resolved now, or do we need to figure out how to resolve it moving forward?
I think that
So
really
definitely
highlights just the need to continuously look at the information, though, because you talk about, looking at some things quarterly, some things folks want it monthly, depending on what it is. But it's the fact that A, you're looking at it, and B, you're analyzing it. Because we were talking about earlier of just some of the barriers when it comes to logging anything into, whether it's software or on paper. It's, well, if we're not doing anything with this data, why am I recording it in the first place? So then it's, hey, we have valuable information that we're getting out of it, and you're the person who is translating all of that. And that's super, super critical to just why we're putting this information in the system in the first place.
Sure. So I had a herd that has been battling SCC issues for some time. And I analyzed that every which way that I could. But when I'm looking at these cows, I was like, none of these cows have been treated. And so I kind of brought it up at the next meeting. And so the guys were keeping a great notebook out in the
Mm.
barn of treatments that they were giving, but that had not been translated into
Oh,
the software. So I couldn't see it.
right.
And again, it's one of those things where there's one guy and he does it when he gets time, and that just wasn't something I mean, trying to keep up with the preg checks
Right.
and
It's
births
just
and
one of the
deaths and
things.
everything like that, right? It's just one more thing. So yeah, again, the herds that I see that are the most successful just have a designated person who
Mm.
is crazy and likes to do it, or at least is willing to do it on a almost daily basis.
Yeah. We have a couple questions. So the first one is from Bethany, and she asked, "What are some of your favorite rabbit hole questions?"
Oh goodness. Um, so I like to look up outcomes of cows. So I have had a couple herds with really high twinning rates.
Mm,
And I looked at all the cows that twinned over the past year, and I basically was looking them all up individually to see what happened. Like, how many times did it take for them to get pregnant again? Did they leave the herd in the first 60 days in milk?
mhm.
Did they have RPs and DAs and everything that you would expect?
Right.
And it if I'm gonna make a statement or a recommendation to producer, I want to make sure that I'm right, but
Yep.
also it's kind of fun. So then I'll take 4 hours and just be like, okay, Kelly, you didn't need to go this far into it. You could have just said, like, yeah, you have too many cows that are twinning and they're not doing good.
Right.
But I just like to say, like, okay, 60% of your cows that twin are leaving the herd in the first 60 days in milk.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
because to me, that's like
You're
we can
giving them
put dollars
actual
on that
numbers.
too.
Right.
Right. Um, Yeah, I think that's the most recent example that I can think of. But sometimes I'll just look at SCC
Hmm.
every which way possible, and just the numbers don't show me anything other than it's high. And then you just kind of have to start interviewing and asking a lot of questions and trying to find out what's really going on, because unless and I mean, there are people who do that for a living and are much better than I at like watching what's going on in a parlor and identifying, oh, different kinds of teat dip and different kinds of
Right.
takeoff procedures and all that kind of stuff. And I'm more than happy to let those consultants do what they're good at. But I can definitely say, like, hey, SCC has been really high for the past 4 tests. And
Yeah.
it looks like it's mostly cows coming out of the dry period, but not necessarily. And
Right.
um yeah, I kind of have a passion for the milk quality part of it. I like to tell people that um every time you drink a glass of milk in Michigan, we have the most productive cows in the country, and we also have the best milk quality.
Yeah.
And the US has the best milk quality in the world. So I say anytime you drink a glass of milk in Michigan, you're drinking the best milk in the world. And
Yes.
no offense, no offense. I'm hoping most of the audience are Michigan people. My Wisconsin buddies probably won't like to hear me say that.
They have the cheese. That's okay. They'll always be known as the cheese state. We had another question come in, or this is actually two questions. Um, Hi, very interesting presentation, and I agree with 100% of it. Just curious whether you also do an analysis on, I think it's morbidity to or mobility, so maybe lameness, to evaluate the effects of overstocking in the rearing program. It might be morbidity.
Um, yeah, I usually when I'm doing these inputs, I'll see how high their heifer non-completion rate is. I have a herd recently that's upwards almost 30%. And so then we start digging into and turns out they've had just a lot of pneumonia issues.
Mhm.
They the facilities that those calves are in, they know are optimal, and long-term goals are to improve ventilation and build a new calf barn and everything like that. But it really is a tough point for them to be at right now. But a lot of that, I'll, so yeah, getting back to those rabbit holes, I'll be putting these inputs into the program and I'll say, wow, that's really high. And then I'll start digging into it because, again, if I notice something, I want to bring it up to the producer, but I want to have enough information and to kind of know where I'm coming from, or at least identify like what happened in January, or
Right.
like where did calves go between 3 and 6 months old, because that's where we're losing a bunch of them,
Right.
just stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, I would love to, I see it and I hear it anecdotally. I would love if there were some research that shows, and if anybody knows, I would love to have it shared with me. When cows are overcrowded, is there a way that we could show you could make the same amount or more milk with fewer cows?
Gosh, wouldn't
Um,
that be amazing?
right. Um, I have a producer who's one of my most successful producers who has decently overcrowded cows, and we laugh about it all the time. He
Right.
says he genetically selected them to survive the overcrowding. And so it's interesting how some herds, if you have excellent cow comfort, if you have good transition care, if you're crowding the right groups,
Right.
there's some herds that are managing it okay, and there's other herds that it's just crashing and burning.
Right.
And so, like, one herd that I work with has not a really designated fresh group, but like an early lactation group that has been overcrowded from an influx of heifers freshening in for
Yeah.
some time. And that's, I think, where our SCC problems are
Mhm.
coming. And to go and walk that pen, it's one thing for me to see it on paper and be
Mhm.
just like, wow, there's that many cows in group 5. And it's another thing to go walk that pen and
Yeah.
try to walk your way around it.
I can
Um,
picture
right,
it. Where you're just like trying to do
right.
it's like you're at a
And
concert just trying to move through people.
And even then, that herd is kicking butt in like a bunch of other areas. So it's like I don't even want to pick on them too much. And
Right.
I also, like, I'm not the one who's there
Right.
either. But
Right.
I have had a couple herds that have recognized that and then have sold a truckload of springers and just been like, oh my gosh, it feels so much better around here, and made a decent amount of money on them.
Right. I
But
mean,
like I said, when they think they made a decent amount of money, I'm like, okay, did you sell them for more than
right.
$2,500?
Yeah, just like the herd that we met with had that very same conversation. We're like, oh yeah, it's a little bit of breathing room, and now we're both like, don't breed
Right, right,
anything
right,
else. Like, don't make more heifers. Like, just
right.
relax.
And
Or
then
plan to breed the next group that's coming in.
right, and I cringe a little bit every time I hear some producer say, "Oh, well, I'm going to build another barn," and I'm like, I know you're just going to fill it the
Right.
same as what your other
Is
barns are.
just as full.
Right.
Yeah. Um, so the second question that they had was, does your tool include an economical analysis of the different strategies when reducing heifer inventories, increasing crossbred bred calves, or figuring out that ratio of where the number is going to stand?
Yeah, so there's another tab that I was actually at a conference last week of all of the consultants in our whole federation across the country and even into Canada and Latin America. And some of them had been using that. And so I was learning from them. There's another tab that you can put in semen costs, like what that herd is getting, and if we shifted their strategy and what beef dairy calves are in their area, and
Mm.
basically here's the strategy that you're on, and if we change you to this strategy, we could make you $50,000 or something like
Yeah.
that. Which is, it's something that I really want to start doing. I
Mhm.
just, not now that I know how and have learned from some of my other consultants, I'd like to start using that.
Yeah.
um like I said, my mentor, the great Julie Ainsworth, always said you have to put dollars to it.
Oh, yeah.
So I tried to do that as much as possible. But yeah, the tools that we have just keep getting better and better too. We have some really talented people in our federation who are helping build these tools for us consultants to use in our own regions.
Oh, yeah.
And we're really fortunate to have those tools.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting, especially with the economics and the landscape of what it looks like now. Just keeping track of that, where just the changes over time from, okay, here's our current estimates with your current calf crop, and
Right,
this is an estimate of what next year might look like, but we have no idea for sure. But
right,
here's like with your next 3-4 months, if you were to
right,
sell this percent, if you were to keep this percent, um and just to get an idea of like, yeah, you're putting in roughly $2,500 into some of these heifers, and I've seen numbers even higher on some farms, and I'm just like,
right,
Lord have mercy, I hope like, I hope you're getting a nice price if you're selling them. But also
right,
it's I I have this question of like, okay, where's the money leak? Which that might not necessarily be the right wording, but it's, where's the money going, that it's not, whether it's in production, whether it's selling that heifer, where is it not coming through? And I think too, I mean, this might be a good question for you, is like, what, when we talk about, wanting to sell, wanting to manage our heifer inventory, is there roughly an age that you see commonly where producers are saying, okay, this is that cutoff point where, whether it's before breeding or after that, 14 to 16 months ideal, or depending on breed anyway, after that ideal breeding window, that's when they sell them, before you're putting more and more expensive feed in them? Or are some folks doing it at 6 months of age? What numbers are you seeing for folks who are just saying, I don't want to put extra money into this thing, I just want to send it to a beef lot?
So I can think of a couple producers that have really cracked down on it and have made some like pretty strict cutoffs. One 5 services, and she's got, and these are heifers that are going out to Kansas. So instead of bringing them home, they figured out a deal where they just sell them off
Okay.
of the
Yeah.
heifer grower instead, because they're just like, why would we pay to bring them home to
Right.
sell
Right.
them? I have heard they have a strict age cutoff, that if a heifer's not pregnant by 500 days,
Hmm.
then she's gone. And like I said, heifers heifers are the most fertile and the most genetically superior animals on the whole farm.
Right.
And the herds that are taking really good care of them, or are recognizing the value in paying somebody else who that's what they do to
Hmm.
do it for them. And I mean, I hear complaints from the people who send heifers to a heifer grower, and different complaints from the people who raise them at home.
Right.
Obviously, there's challenges on both sides, but it really is the future of the herd that needs to be invested
Hmm.
well into. So yeah, I think most of them, if they get, most of them are going to be repro calls
Okay.
every once in a while. Like, oh, you see ones. I'm trying to think of like what age. Obviously, like most pneumonia calves are
Right.
gonna make it, or they're not, or
Right.
they're just be
They
so
already
far.
look
And
rough,
there's just
and
more and more research that shows that even as calves, if they don't get off on on a good
right.
start, they never make it up in their
Right.
entire lives. Like even into lactation, even if they make it into the milking herd, they never produce as much. They never breed back as fast as heifer calves that were doing well from the beginning.
Right.
Um, and it's hard to say, yeah, don't invest any more time or money into that
Yeah.
heifer. But I think we're gonna see that keep keep going that way.
Right.
Because we are at a point now that you don't have to keep every heifer. I mean, I think I think some producers have kind of had that handed down to them, or from like the previous trends that we talked about. There
Right.
was a time that you had to keep every heifer if you
Because you were
wanted the
losing
future of your
30% of
herd.
them, right?
Right. Now we are in a good place where we can put the right things in place that like we don't have to keep every heifer.
Right.
And that we do build some of that buffer in, just knowing that like some heifers aren't going to make it, but that's the number that we figure out, the number of heifers that we need actually does include the non-completion rate and
Right.
stillborn rate already into it. And so that's why we just monitor it at least every quarter to make sure that that's not changing too much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen some farms where if as a calf she's had one pneumonia event, they just automatically DNB her and say, we know if she's already struggled with that, she's
Right,
more than like she's at greater risk of struggling during weaning and then going through
right,
that stressor and then moving into barns. And if you think about the herds where they get through that milk phase or on milk phase, and then it's just they push them, and it's it's like, and they're put into a group pen and expected to perform, and some folks are just like, okay, just stay alive and get bred. And I'm like,
right,
well, yes, but
right,
also
right,
but then you think of the folks who are okay, they get transitioned into that group pen, and then it's into a larger group, into a larger group, into potentially more crowded and more crowded and more crowded, depending on the setup, depending um on each farm. And so when I think of it, it's with even when looking at like sire pages and everything, and a lot of the health metrics that we're looking at too, where it's
sure,
okay, we're looking at some of the repro health, we're looking at some of the other health, and overall it's, is that animal going to have, I don't want to say a very broad term of like overall quality of life, but is she really going to keep up with the rest of her pen mates or her
right,
herd mates?
right,
And or are we saying, she's not going to make it as a dairy cow, but she can still be plenty fine going into the beef market, and saying,
sure, sure,
yeah, absolutely. And so it's, I think how you were talking about just like the mindset shift of where we used to be, because I know like conversations with folks who are like two generations back, where those are kind of like owners operators right now, and they're saying, oh, we got to keep everything, we got to keep everything, and now we're saying, no, you actually don't have to, because the health has improved, the care has
right,
improved, the feed has improved, every
right,
genetics have improved. And so we have a lot of these things where we have just changed the ball game completely.
right,
And then it's like, okay, how can we get those heifers who may not make it as milk cows still get you money? And so that's where
right,
it's saying, how do we get her to be profitable even though she's not going to make it into the milking herd?
right. I've done ride-alongs with many of our very talented AI techs in the state, and was on one with one of the technicians, and he was pointing out, and you could see it in the whole breeding pen. You look across the backs of all the heifers, and they're all within this much of each other.
Wow.
You're like, yes, you are killing it.
That's definitely a feather in his cap for sure.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are nearing the end of the hour here, so let me do that real quick. Maybe not. Let's see if I can do that. Trying to do our last slide here. I might not be so lucky. Who knows? Let's see. Oh, that's what it is. There
It's
we go.
always
Beautiful.
technology.
Technology. It works sometimes. So once again, I would like to thank everybody who was able to attend our session this evening. And if you have any questions after tonight, feel free to reach out to me. I could forward them to Kelly as well. And please, if you have time, do the post-session survey. I will pull the link into the chat so that everybody has access to it, along with where you'll be able to find the there we go, where you'll be able to find the YouTube playlist, the podcast where we take these sessions, upload the audio from them, and you'll also be able to rewatch the video. And if you want to look at some of the graphs that Dr. Sporer showed and all of our other presenters, you'll be able to do that. So once again, thank you so much. And thank you, Kelly, so much for coming on. Do you have any final things you'd like to share with the group?
No, just that we are so happy to do what we're doing, and I work with some of the best producers around and just really enjoy helping them and bringing the services that we do to help them be more profitable.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a great rest of your evening.